Thank you for joining us. Welcome back to another episode of the Jackasses podcast. We are the Salisbury University College Democrats. This is our official podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Jake Burdett. Kick it to my other co-host.
I'm Evan Murphy. I'm Vice President of Salisbury College Democrats.
And I'm Ethan Sensback, a member of the Salisbury College Democrats.
Yes, and today we are very excited to announce a guest that we have. So our guest today is former U.S. Senator from Alaska and two-time former Democratic presidential candidate Mike Gravel. Mike Gravel served as a senator for Alaska from 1969 to 1981 and is most known for making history by heroically reading the Pentagon Papers into the Senate record and exposing U.S. war crimes in Vietnam, which helped lead to the U.S. pulling out from Vietnam. Gravel further solidified himself as a strong, progressive, anti-establishment voice with his 2008 and 2020 presidential campaigns, where direct democracy and anti-imperialism were key platform planks. Mike Gravel has since expanded on his direct democracy initiatives in his book, The Failure of Representative Government and the Solution, A Legislature of the People. Evan's got it there, physical copy. He joins us here on the Jackasses podcast via Skype from California today. Mike, thank you for joining us on. How are you handling this coronavirus crisis right now?
Thank you for inviting me. And how I'm handling, I'll be 90 on May 13th. And so I'm really high on the target list. And so I've stayed home totally, no question of going out of the house, except I had to go out to get some blood work done. And then on Thursday, I'll have to go to the doctor to get a special shot to strengthen my bones. But other than that, I'm staying home. I'm trying to organize our efforts to launch the formal launch of the book, The Failure, and that will be on a 12-week program, plus setting up a website, two websites to be able to mesh them together so that people can go ahead and buy the book on our website. So the whole exercise here is to get people to buy the book and to make the purchase of the book viral. Now, will we be able to succeed? If we do, it will open up a whole avenue of the issue of who's the boss in our society. Is it the people or is it our representatives? Right now, our representatives have a monopoly on lawmaking. And what we need to do is to break that monopoly and permit citizens to be able to make laws in a deliberative fashion. I'm not talking about just jumping in and making laws. That's anarchy. I'm talking about a process to do it in a very deliberative way. Now, this book essentially is the manual to create and operate a legislature of the people. Now, to arrive at this success is twofold. One, we have to get the book out there virally so that people get educated on the subject. Next, after a sufficient number, I'm going to tell you, 50 million Americans have to understand what this concept is all about of direct democracy and they're making laws. If that many people don't understand it, there's no point in going into an election because the elites will go after us anyway. But the format we have for conducting a national election leaves them out of the picture. And there's nothing can stop us once we start the election and get a sufficient number of people who vote for the package, a constitutional amendment and the Legislative Procedures Act, vote for that on the order of 60, 70, 80 million people. It will become the law of the land without anybody in government touching or putting a glove on it. That's the dynamic of what we need to start. And will we be successful? I know that we have I just, from kids who ran my campaign, we have at the base about 65,000 people. We got to double, treble that. And so you, the people within my voice, not only need to buy the book, because it's the book is not going to break you. We're talking about ebook is but $3.99, and the soft cover that was Evan was just showing us is $13.99. Now there'll be a website where you can go to buy that just by clicking on. But we're in the process of setting that up right now. But it doesn't stop the three of you and anybody else within the sound of my voice of going out and getting 4, 5, 6, 10 people to buy the book. This is how we go viral. And we'll be doing a full bore launch around the 1st of May.
Yeah.
So that's my shtick.
Yeah, and again, the title of the book is The Failure of Representative Government and the Solution, a Legislature of the People, and that's on transitioning us from a representative democracy that we have now, at least on paper, and you would argue that it's not really working and that we need to transition to a more direct democracy. So do you want to take a second and explain, I guess, what are the problems with our representative democracy today, and how would a direct democracy help in a time like now with the coronavirus?
Well, let's just look at what happened this last month when the Congress passed a budget that included all the wars that are going on, being funded, that had the continuation of what Obama had put in place, which is a $1.7 trillion for nuclear weapons. Need I tell you more? Here, $22 billion for a new submarine. We've got 12 Tridents. Each Trident has 280 warheads. I mean, we're in a sick situation. And so when you look at our wonderful Democrats who just passed this legislation and oblivious to what is in it and what it means to society. And of course, here we go, the Congress, whether the House or Senate, they're responsible for passing these sanctions against Venezuela. There's 30 countries that we sanction. How ridiculous that we should be so arrogant to think that we have the right, because a sanction is war by another means. And so how arrogant do we Americans think we are? And of course you see what now in the coronavirus. Essentially, it's all us Americans. What about the rest of the world? What about the rest of the world that's a lot more at risk than the fact that our stupid leadership didn't get this right? You know, we have a fool at the head of the government, and it shows. And people are dying as a result of that. And so they're going to die as a result of that worldwide because we don't really pull together as the one unit of human beings on this planet. In the book, when you buy it, chapter 21 deals with the 21st century. And it really lays out, now this is not the present problem. We already have that going. This is the future. And the future is either annihilation of the planet by a nuclear accident or the annihilation of the planet by the continuous pollution that we are foisting on the planet. So these two things are happening. And in all candor, when we think we're doing something to solve the planet's environmental problem, give me a break. It's not happening. And even if we go back into the Paris Accord, there's no teeth in enforcing that. Here, I'll say what is not supposed to be said in America, and that is that we have to give up our sovereign power to a global power, as we did in 1777 and 78, when we turned around and set up a federated system because we knew the system we had was not working. Well, it's not working in the world today, and we need to set up. And I'll bet you, who will lead in this will be China and Russia. It'll be the United States that will be difficult to get them to get off their high horse and say, okay, we're ready to become part of a world government It's going to function for the benefit of the people of the world, not just, as we say now, make America great, which is to deny the success of other countries, because it's a zero-sum game. And this makes America great is at the expense of other human beings in these countries. We're so concerned about employment and good economic. But what about the rest of the people? Don't they need a job? Don't they need to eat in Bangladesh just like we want to eat and survive in the United States? This is what we have to do. This virus is an opportunity that will wake up the human race, that we've got to change the structure of human government. I deal with that in the 6th chapter, the 21st century. So here again, it's up to you. I'm doing my best, but it's up to 3 of you and your colleagues to try to get this book to go viral. That means get 10 friends to buy it, and they can afford it. And of course, now that everybody's locked into their house, which I think you'll stay there, well, you'll be able to read it. Read it, and I would recommend this. I'd say read it and wait about 3 or 4 days, read it again. It took me 25 to 30 years to create the concept within this book. So it jumped on. So if you want to cover other issues, I think I dumped on the Congress official for you.
Yeah, no, that's
You can find your own. And this is not to denigrate the Democrats any more than Republicans. I think Republicans are crazy, and the suppression of voting for the last 30 years has demonstrated that. But the Democrats are not without sin. Far from it. They've been co-sponsors of these wars from the get-go, and that's what we have to change within the Democratic Party. And I don't think we can. I think what we need to do is to bring the people in to the operation of government as lawmakers, so the people, in a very deliberative fashion, can make these decisions that the Congress and the powers that be who control the Congress are not letting happen.
Yeah, and I think, that's a good answer of what the problems of representative democracy are, is that it's failing to actually represent the people. And if we had a direct democracy system in a time like right now, I highly doubt the people would be voting to give trillions of dollars to Wall Street every day. And I'm sure the people would be voting to give a bailout more to the people rather than the corporations. But we're glad.
People fine. If you're bailing out the people, you're automatically bailing out the corporations. You don't have to bail out the corporations separate. This is a gift. This is a ripoff right now that's going on. You don't need to bail out the corporations. If you provide for the corporation to have the money to pay for the salaries of the people, which we could do directly to the people, then the corporations will take care of themselves. They'll have employees ready to function when there's a market. And so why do we have to bail out the corporation? This is a hoax put on by Wall Street and the elites who control our society. Let me invite you to, if you want to seek control, go to I got a senior moment, and I can have that at 90.
Yes, you get a pass.
A Biden moment.
Yeah, a Biden moment. Yeah, that I think that's a good transition because
I have one question about the stimulus package. So, Senator, if you were a senator now, would you have taken the Bernie and AOC route where you would argue for bailing out for the people, but if ultimately you can only get a couple provisions in, would you ultimately vote for it like they did, or would you vote against it?
Well, I would, as a politician, Bernie and Tulsi, I would vote with them on this. And I can't tell you how much I admire Bernie with the courage he's displaying, and Tulsi Gabbard and the courage that she's displayed. And she's pulled out of the race. I have not approached Bernie or Tulsi on the failure of representative government, because if both of them would buy into that, that would be a great push forward, particularly Bernie and Tulsi, both because I would hope that they would see that since they firsthand know that representative government's not the answer. They know that firsthand. They see it daily, and they see it in the assaults that are made on them because they don't kowtow to the Wall Street military-industrial complex. Keep in mind, Wall Street is pouring money into the Democratic campaign of Biden and others who were there. And of course, not only the Biden, but the military-industrial complex. This will give you how bad the election was. Do you recall hearing anybody from the networks ask the question about the military-industrial complex?
No.
No, never.
In all the debates. And this is the 800-pound gorilla in the room, and nobody wants to talk about it because the 800-pound gorilla, along with Wall Street, is controlling all of the members of Congress, all of the institutions of government by the nose. I mean, this is pathetic. And of course, as we know, that the mainstream media is controlled by the military-industrial complex and Wall Street. And of course, Wall Street has always poured money into the Democratic Party. This is how they can keep the Democratic Party sleeping in the corner while they rip off the Treasury and take us to war. And all I got to do is say to you gentlemen that I fought to end the draft many years ago, and that is giving you physical protection from being the fodder, the cannon fodder that's been the fact in the past. So bless you.
Yes. So thank you.
Yeah.
Well, wait a second. Now, since you owe me, now you got to go out and make this viral.
Yes, I'll buy the book as a small.
More than that, you got to get friends to buy it. Yes. I don't know how large a podcast that people are watching this right now.
Yeah, so this isn't live. It'll be recorded or it'll be uploaded in a day or two. But we usually get a little over 200 views an episode. It's not a huge audience, but we reach primarily youth, and that's who I think that your message is really going to resonate with, because we seem to see more than anyone how much of a failure this system has set up our futures for us. So I think it's I'm glad that you're touching on that. It's more than just a one-party system. Yes, we all know that the Republicans are bad and the Republicans are corrupt, but the Democratic Party also has its fair share of corruption and warmongering. So considering you were just a candidate in this 2020 race, as well as you also ran against Joe Biden in 2008, what do you think of the Democratic Party's role in propping up Joe Biden? Do you think Joe Biden has the mental competency to even serve in that role? How do you think that's going to play out?
Well, first off, I don't. I will be endorsing Biden along with Bernie if that happens. Now, this is not a done deal by any stretch of the imagination. We have considerable over 20 more states to weigh in on their voting, and from what I can see, is Bernie is hanging in there and going to be in every one of those elections and collect as many ballots as possible. Now, what we see, and here I would recommend, if you want to know what's going on, is go to Fox right now and see what Hannity is doing to Biden. And now that's going to play over and over again. So fine, they'll have their base, but that kind of a tactic will affect the independents, because they'll question now this is not phony stuff. They're showing Biden videos directly, and Joe is one at this point seems to be the standard bearer. Well, if by the time the convention rolls around, Joe's problems of being old, 77 or 70, whatever, are showing up, then the Democrats have got to look at their whole card, and then what they're stuck. Joe has acquired all of these other senior moment, all of the other chits, we'll call them, ballots. That's it, for the convention. Now, things could change between now and then, so I don't know. But I do know that Bernie has stated publicly that he will support the nominee. And I think people could say, well, that makes me angry. Well, the circumstance makes me angry, not the fact that Bernie would need to do this, and I would need to do this, because letting Trump have a free hand at another 4 years is unbelievable. Now, tragically enough, that this could push us for more people to go viral on having people make laws, because that's the only way you could stop Trump. Here, stop and think of all the judges that the Republicans are putting in place that are to be there for the rest of their lives. And how could we change that? Here, if we can enact the National Citizens Legislative Procedures Act, what we'll be able to do is to take an amendment, create an amendment, because the people would have the right to do this, not that create an amendment to turn around and have term limits for all federal judges. Term limits. That would mean that you serve 12 years and you're out. So we could get rid of all of these over a short period of time, get rid of all of these crazy judges who've been put in place for life, and there's nothing you can do about it unless you can empower the people to make laws. You can begin to see how that would shape the dynamic if the people had the right to make laws. Now, let me assure you one thing. The elites will tell you that you're not smart enough to be a lawmaker. You have to be smart enough. You got to run for office, and you get enough people who think you're smart enough and vote for you, and then you get elected to office, and then you prove that you weren't smart enough to be an elected official. So this is the dynamic of what's going on. If you're smart enough to vote for a human being to represent you, when you don't know, you can't mind read that other human being. All you can do is hope that what he's telling you, he really means or she really means, and they'll do something about it. But then the minute they step into the structure of representative government, whether they're of good heart, here, AOC, who I admire very much, she's a good heart, but I don't think she could get anything passed in the Congress today. And she did a very smart thing, which was to tell people, if you're going to donate to people who are like-minded as us, donate directly. Don't donate to the Democratic Party, because they're going to give it to the whales, to the Clyburns of our party, and we don't need that. We got enough of that. So I hope I've been candid enough with you in this regard.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, there's some, sort of, whether you want to call it conspiracies or rumors or whatever, people suspect that maybe the Democratic Party might try to do some sneaky trick, realizing that Biden can't beat Trump. Maybe they'll try to replace Biden with somebody else, like Cuomo at the convention. Could you see them maybe trying something like that?
They could, but keep in mind, Cuomo was not very popular until the virus came along, and there's a lot of people that recall his shortcomings. But he's very courageous right now. He's very direct. Well, this is leadership. No, I think you're right. You're right to be suspicious of what the DNC will do. Now, supposing that before the actual balloting takes place, that Biden makes a flub that's not correctable, then what will the DNC do with all the Biden votes? Will they try to give that to somebody else? The logical person to receive it would be the only other person standing, and that's Bernie. Now, I got to tell you that Wall Street and the military-industrial complex are fearful of Bernie, and they'll elect a mad dog before they'll elect Bernie. So that's a task we have to watch, because the Democratic leadership has never played with a full deck. And for that, I'm including Obama, Hillary, Perez, you name Wilson and Schultz. They cheated. I just gave you a litany of names. They cheated Bernie out of the nomination in 16. And now in 20, they would do everything in their power. They've already tried, but it hasn't succeeded because Bernie had developed such a strong base. But what has succeeded is Main Street media, controlled by Wall Street and the industrial complex, have really sent out waves of fear that Bernie would be something that we shouldn't have. And it used the word socialist. Well, he's a democratic socialist. I got to tell you, I'm a democratic socialist. What does a democratic socialist mean? It means that you want to use the institutional government for the benefit of the people. Now, there's Republican socialists. And what those Republican socialists do, they use government the same way to benefit the few. Example, the tax law that passed to enrich primarily the 1%. So I'm fearful, and I think you are too. We don't know what will bring forth.
So, sorry. Sorry if I cut you off there a little bit. I was going to say, going off that, if we assume that Bernie did lose this primary, and regardless of who wins in November, whether it's Biden or Trump, where does the progressive movement go from here? I know a lot of people are worried that, like, Bernie, this is our last, chance to have social democracy in the United States. So where do we go? What do we do in these next 4 years to make sure that in 2024 we have a viable progressive or democratic socialist candidate?
Well, you don't have to think about that. What you can do is what I'm suggesting is have the failure of representative government go viral. And now once it's viral, that would mean that, and let me explain how this could unfold. If we can get anywhere from 40 to 50 million Americans to understand what this book is talking about, that means you get out there, not only get people to buy the book, but you get out there and you do town meetings all over the country, educating people with the book in hand that this is how it works. And so once that many people understand this, we don't have to wait 4 years. I think if we had a full court press and could get 50 million people within a year to understand what this direct democracy is all about, then the next thing we do is we begin an election, a national election, put in place by volunteers calling themselves Philadelphia 2. And if we can get upwards of 60 to 70 to 80 million people to vote for this package, a constitutional amendment and a legislative procedures act, if we can get 80 million, 70 million people to vote for this in a direct election, not conducted by the government, got nothing to do with the government, directly by the people, and then we declare this the law of the land, and we begin to do the preparations to make the functioning of this. So within 2 years, we can be in a position to begin to do the processing of people who want to enact laws. And there's a long list that's easy to look at. And so now what will happen? The people can weigh in on these issues. Now, what will happen the minute the people become the lawmakers? They become the senior partners in lawmaking. They become more important than the Congress, than the presidency, than the judicial system. The people become the boss. And so and that will make representative government extremely responsible and clean it up from the craziness that we see today, because the people will be setting the policies, and it will be the Congress that will implement these policies in a detailed fashion. This is what's possible. Have you seen anything happen differently in the last 10, 20 years? And do you see anything happening differently right then as I'm standing in front of you right now? Of course not. And so if we're waiting another 4 years, whether it's Trump or Biden, it's going to be the same old, same old. Trump will be a lot more serious because he's absolutely mentally disturbed. So, but as far as Biden, he gets to be elected, he'll be a placeholder, and that's not meant as derogatory. That's meant as an exact fact. And so I would support Biden along with Bernie because we would not have a choice. But who knows? We may have a choice that's not apparent to us right now as we're talking. And cross your fingers on that.
Yes.
Do you think ultimately in the election, do you think Biden would lose as it stands right now, or are you hopeful of his chances of defeating Trump, even though we've kind of already established for most people there isn't going to be a huge effect or change depending on whoever gets in?
I think it's possible he could lose. Trump is crazy as a loon. By the same token, if you watch what Fox is doing with these repetition of ads, eating away at Biden's independent voters, he would lose. And also what could happen is, hey, you're talking about people in their 70s. Well, just read the obituaries, and you'll see how through them. I read the obituaries because I'm curious who I'm ahead of. But so Biden, he could have a flub in the course of the campaign. He could stroke. Here, Bernie's had a heart attack. Now that's a blessing in disguise, because now you know the problem. He has heart disease. I have heart disease. I almost had a total heart attack. Didn't happen. Caught it days before it happened. And so the same thing would happen to Bernie. So, we have to be, there's an old saying, work hard and be lucky. You guys work hard and make this viral, and then be lucky for the rest of it.
Yes, we're working on it. But I'm glad you touched on, it's, in terms of where we go from here, it's really transitioning to a direct democracy where people have a greater say in the policies that get passed. But the hard part is, how do we get from our current representative democracy to that direct democracy? And that brings up the whole kind of debate going on in the progressive community of, do we continue to try to work within the Democratic Party and to try to take over the Democratic Party from within, or is the big money ties so deeply entrenched in the party that it's kind of a lost cause, and maybe we should consider alternatives, whether that means third parties or a completely, non-electoral way of doing things, something like the direct democracy maybe.
Well, obviously, my view is the latter, that we need to establish a direct democracy. I don't think you're going to see any fundamental change. You see, when you look at the first chapter, which is the failure of representative government, that's it. Here, we go to war. That's a failure. And we don't, these are wars that we initiate. We, the United States, are the threatening body in the world today. And proof of that is you do an overview. Who is spending money on defense or war-making capability? The United States, more than anybody else, more than China, more than Russia, and obviously more than countries like Venezuela and the others, to Iran. So when you look at yourself, you got to do your reasoning and say, hey, show me what the progressives have done over time. The last time we saw a progressive situation was under Franklin Delano Roosevelt. That's the last time. When we saw it under Biden, when we saw it under Clinton, when he had control of the whole thing, what happened? We cut out Glass-Steagall and turned around and set the banks up to scrutiny fairly well for the next few. Well, they're still doing it, and we can thank the Democrats under the leadership of Bill Clinton. And then you go to the next thing that was done, and that is well, here, I could do a senior moment, but I'll let you ask more questions, because the progressives know the problem. The problem is to hope against hope that things will change. Well, that's unrealistic. If things haven't changed in more than 250 years, then don't tell me there's hope that it will change the next election cycle. We have not changed since 1789. 1789, in the first administration of George Washington, and all of the framers, all of the founders knew that factions were diabolical. And yet the first thing that they happened in the first 4 years of the administration of George Washington, you had the faction set up by what's his name, Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson. That's when they set up the party system, and it's been screwing the system up from thence forward. And so now hope against hope that they're going to be able to change it. Here, you got a process right now where it's the parties that determine any advancement in the structure of government. That's it. Republican Party, and maybe set up a third party. I got to tell you, setting up a third party is an exercise in futility, because the third party will, the minute it has power, word is power, it will act exactly the way the present parties act. Because what the parties are into is acquiring power. Whether to use that power to prevail remains to be seen. But the issue with the party system is power. And that's the reason why the Democratic Party is so afraid of Bernie and Tulsi, because the military industrial complex, Wall Street, to control the Democratic Party, are deathly afraid of these two individuals, because they represent fundamental change. Now, could they effect fundamental change within the context of our structure? I question. I've not had a conversation with Tulsi or Bernie about this, but I would vote for them. I would hope for them, but I would tell you in my heart of hearts, I don't believe the system, even if they get elected, tolerate the ability to make changes. And the changes are not fundamental. Bernie and Tulsi are for change, but they're for policy changes, not structural change. The only person I know, the only system I know for structural change is what I'm suggesting in direct democracy. And I'm not talking about the United States. I'm talking about worldwide. The only structure that I know for a structural change is direct democracy. What I'm thinking.
Yeah, no. Ethan, did you have something?
No, you can.
Okay.
Did you have another question?
Yeah, I had another one. So, it sounds like even third parties, Mike, you're skeptical of, because it's not like it's only been the Republican and Democratic Party throughout U.S. history. We've had other political parties, and the same thing does always tend to happen: a two-party system where both parties get corrupted by power. But it's very hard when you have a huge institution like a political party like the Democratic Party and all the money, organized money behind it working against you. It can be hard to rise up through that system as an honest progressive. It's very hard. With that being said, it's not impossible. For example, you are an outspoken anti-establishment progressive, yet you are still able to somehow get elected all the way to U.S. Senator of Alaska. So I guess my question is, for people that are trying to work within the system and take over the Democratic Party from within, what is your advice for maneuvering around the party establishment trying to work against you? How were you able to do that and rise to the position of a senator?
Well, keep in mind, I got thrown out of this. I lost.
Say that one more time. Sorry.
I slowly alienated everybody who supported me.
Oh, after you won, though. After you won, right?
So I lost office, But here, I wasn't really working very hard to get elected. I was actually disgusted with the system. I was disgusted with myself. And so I just was fed up with politics. And I had grappled with that in the book Citizen Power the first edition, when I was trying to get my handle around the people being in charge. But I was too steeped in the system of representative government to fully grasp. But after 10 years out of office, staying out of politics, following it very closely, reading everything about it, and then all of a sudden it hit me in 1990 that it's the people. The answer is the people. There's only two venues for change. The government, we know, is not going to change, and the other venue is the people. But what's wrong with the people? They don't have the tools to make laws. They can protest, they can get out and do a revolution, but why would it be so immature to have a violent revolution to make the transition from representative democracy to direct democracy? And at the same time, in this proposal that I have, we don't touch the representative government. We leave it alone. We just concentrate on bringing the people in, independent of representative government, to make laws. The representative government still will make laws. And as I pointed out, the end result will be that the people will set policy in general terms, and it will be up to the Congress to implement that policy in a day-to-day fashion. So it's a win-win. But the problem is that this takes the leadership, the power out of the hands of the 1% elites, and it gives it to the people. So rather than continue, you've got to take this to heart. We have a minority ruling government. It's the minority, and it's not a big minority. It's a distinct 10% at best minority that rules our society. Not just the government, the culture, the religion, the whole thing gets in the bailiwick, the militarism. So now that's what you're facing with. If you turn around and bring the people in to set policy, now you have a majoritarian rule government. And who is the majority? The people. And with the structure, I've got the structure in the book. All you got to do is read the book, wait a week, and read it again. It took me 25 to 30 years to put this together. Do you think you can read it in one sitting and understand all the nuances that I've spent my life putting in there? Hell no. Just read it, discuss it. Read it, discuss it. That's what we got to do by making the book viral, so that people will read the book. Millions of people will read the book and discuss it. And we can set up organizations going around the country, having town meetings, having whatever process we have of getting people together. The technology is right there. Look at us right now. We're using technology to talk to each other. This is a miracle from my point of view, because when I was born, when I was a kid, we had ice boxes, not refrigerators, ice boxes. They bring ice on the back of somebody's shoulder and put it into the ice box. Then you got to empty the pan of water. But this is when I was a kid, and look what we got right now. It's awesome. I've lived through this entire revolution, and I'm trying to capitalize very imperfectly, because I can only do it when people help me. Because I could not have set this thing up right now. Well, I would get an assistant to do it, but that's it. You people can do it, and so that's why the appeal is to young people. Hey, we've got $65,000 in our mailing list. We're going to communicate with them. You can expand that mailing list. You can use your organization, what I would call the Progressive Young Democrats, to get out there and say, hey, read the book, study the book, let's discuss it. Because until you discuss it, you don't appreciate the nuances. You don't appreciate. Let me give you an example. In the amendment to the Constitution, I have a process in there to be able to fund the direct democracy. What's that process? It's very straightforward. It took me years to figure this out. I'm telling you, it took me years to figure it. The process is very simple. let's appropriate the same amount of money to the people's legislature as we appropriate to the Congress. Done deal. I don't know how accurate that is. It doesn't have to be accurate. This is what we're spending in representative government to make laws. Let's spend the same amount over here to have people make laws. Now, we know that the government, the representative government, screws the people every election year, thinking, oh, they're going to vote, but then they forget the suppression. Can you imagine standing in line for 6 hours to vote? Do you not realize that's a criminal activity of the Democrats or Republicans that won't permit it? The politicians don't want to make voting easy. They want to make my people vote easy, but they want to screw your people. And this is not the way to run an election. But that's what we sell people. Oh, hey, you've got freedom, you've got liberty, because you can vote. What the hell? You can vote? Tell me another story. Just tell me another story. And anybody that looks at what's going on and doesn't understand this is willfully deficient mentally, period.
Yeah.
So now what we've got to do is realize that the steps are there. The legislature of the people's got to be independent of the representative government. Otherwise, it's like the states. You know, we have initiative states, 23 states that make laws by initiative. They're all controlled by representative government. And it shows. You want to have an initiative in California? Cough up $1 million and you can get started. Just get started. And that's not what I call a democratic process, a direct democracy process. But that's what we got. And incidentally, let me point out to you that the Supreme Court has ruled repeatedly that the people at the state level have a right to make laws. Now, do you think when this issue comes up, I brought the issue to the Supreme Court, and they didn't grant certiorari because they didn't want to deal with this issue with a little pipsqueak like me over here, this issue that the people are the boss as opposed to the government. They didn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. But once we get it going, they won't be able to touch it anyway, because that's the reason why we're using a constitutional amendment coupled with a Legislative Procedures Act, a law. The amendment means that the Supreme Court can't touch it. All they can do is sit by and wait for this law to be enacted, the constitutional amendment, and they can interpret the language if they want. But I'll tell you, we've written this language so clear that you'd have to be really hard-pressed not to understand the details of it. And so, we take the constitutional amendment, we set up the Article 1 is to establish the sovereignty. We are sovereign. Now, what do you think makes you sovereign? Do you think it's the Constitution? Do you think it's the government? Hell no. What makes you sovereign is because at birth, when you were born, you were made sovereign. And it was the ability of your parents to guide you into adulthood. Or it's what makes you sovereign, not the Constitution of the United States. In fact, if anything, the Constitution of the United States is subservient to your sovereignty. And it says so right in the preamble of the Constitution. We, the people, do ordain. Now, that's what the framers did, and that's the mistake they did, because they articulated that the people were in charge. When in point of fact, they never brought the people into the writing of the Constitution, never brought the people into the ratification of the Constitution, because the majority of them wanted to protect slavery, and they did that ever since the founding of our country. I could go on, but yeah. You can't. When you read the chapters on the Constitution, there's 2 chapters on it. It should be very edifying for you.
I had a question, just based off of kind of what we're seeing now. I think the virus and everything attached to it, I think, is really kind of laying bare just how much our systems have failed, both in the U.S. and internationally. Do you think that the effect from this will be people gaining a conscience to that, or do you think this will end and people will most likely go back to the same systems as before?
The possibility is twofold, and you have to put your finger on it. One of the things that was a part of the First World War was the League of Nations. very, very inadequately structured, and of course, Wilson is now one of my favorite people. But in the Second World War, Roosevelt was pushing for the United Nations. Roosevelt also had a similar flaw, but it was not readily visible. And that was that Roosevelt's experience with the First World War was that the problem of society is colonialism. So he concentrated on dissolving colonialism and setting up a United Nations whereby people could all get out of colonialism and set up national state governments. Well, now we have the United Nations, which is set up with nation-state governments. It needs to be broadened out. One, we need to do it with the Security Council vetoes of the victors of the Second World War. Mm-hmm. What we should do is have a Security Council made up of the victors of the Second World War, plus Japan, Germany, Brazil, Indonesia, and that should be of a Security Council. And then we should have the rotating members of the Security Council from the General Assembly. Now, the General Assembly should be broken up from the way it is, and it should be based upon, like the House of Representatives in the United States. The states that participate in the General Assembly, but on the basis of their populations. And so you would have the ridiculous situation that exists today, where Belize, which has 700,000 people, has the same vote in the General Assembly of China. That's ridiculous. Now, people would say, well, my God, if we do that in the General Assembly, what's going to happen? You see, you're going to have China and Indonesia and India. They'll take over the General Assembly. Well, not really. Not really. India is the largest democracy in the system, and China is the organization. This is going to surprise you. China is the organization that brought about more freedom to human beings than anybody in the history of civilization. Let me digest that for you. Mm-hmm. China has, here, three of you, you've got money, you're living in a nice home. Supposing you're on the street and you didn't have any money and you're diving into trash cans to feed yourself. Do you have freedom?
No one is available
No.
to take your call. Please leave a message after the tone.
So now, if you don't have money, you don't have freedom. And so you get the people in the United States who are in poverty, they don't have freedom. And so what has China done? They took 600 million people from poverty to middle class. That's never been done in the history of civilization. And what that means, they've provided 600 million people with an element of freedom that did not exist for them before. Now, sure, they can't vote for a new leader, but then again, there's a lot more involved in freedom than just voting for politicians. And we've learned that in the United States. Because if you're living on the street and you vote to do something about the street people, you better hold your breath because it's not going to happen. Los Angeles, it's a crime for us to see the amount of people, 700,000 Americans living on the street in tents. This should be humbling. We say we're the greatest nation on earth. My God, there's no proof of that. There's no proof of that. Not in real substance. Now, do we have a lot of scientific advancements? Sure. Immigration, starting with Einstein, and go from there. Of the people that came to the United States and made our country great. And of course, now you've got the nativists that say, we got to close the doors. We got freedom, which of course we don't have. Pull up the gangplank. The only way our country is going to grow and succeed, and it has in the past to some degree, but not enough. Not enough. Mm-hmm. Because in the 200 years, you look at the amount of wars we've been involved, the amount of pain that we've done to people. Here, most people, when we talk about freedom in China, what about the freedom from the Civil War to the Second World War? where we had the government calling out the troops to break up the strike break. What was the strike break trying to do? Just get a living wage. Just get safety in the workplace. This is what they were doing. And so every president from the Civil War on has been involved in suppression of the people's right to realize their improved life. This is our record. Of course, we don't want to talk about that because we're the greatest nation on earth, and that's all we can say is, boy, we're the best. We're not the best. We're not the best. We're not even close to being the best. I think today figures are somewhere either 26 or 46 in the ranking of life expectancy. This is great United States. Child mortality. Oh, I could go on, but I think that you're almost very sophisticated in knowing these facts, but you're still stuck in the American context of hope against hope. That one more election will solve the problem. Well, here, when you're my age, you'll have been through all these elections, and you'll be asking yourself, what the hell have we done for the last 50 years?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I feel like we just got to witness one of those classic Gravel moments right there with that answer. So thank you for that. I just got two more quick questions, and I think we're going to wrap it up because we're approaching on an hour. But it's a fun question and a more serious question. The fun question is, we just had quite the batch of candidates running in the Democratic primary. Who do you think was like the worst of all? Who was like the one that you trust the least, that you think is like the most sneaky and conniving, that you would not want as the nominee or as the president?
I think Buttigieg.
Buttigieg?
Yeah, agreed, sir.
He false here immediately realized that he was becoming the puppet of Congress and Wall Street, and tried to capitalize on it with a very particular person, and so that's who I have the least confidence in, because one, he doesn't understand that he's being a puppet, and he's a very bright guy, so I don't understand that. He can work for McKinsey. He's very bright. I'm dyslexic, so I was held back in the third grade when I was a kid. So up until I was an adult, I thought there was something wrong with me from an intelligence point of view. Then I realized that I'm dyslexic, and so I reversed everything. And so that's why the nuns held me back in the third grade. So, well, that's okay. I paid them back. I left the church when I was 5.
Nice. But yeah, we're also.
Science tells us that your mind is not mature until you're 25.
Yes.
And of course, that applies to my kids who are running my campaign.
Oh, yeah.
But it applies to all of us. I don't think that, I don't know how many of you are 25, but if you're not, hang on, because it's gonna get better.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you. I think we probably on this call all agree. Buttigieg,
Yeah.
Quite threat. But yeah, now for the more real serious question before we end is, I don't really think that we can overstate how brave and heroic what you did in the 70s with exposing the Pentagon Papers and reading it into the public record as a U.S. Senator. That was a massive risk that you took, and I'm sure it didn't make you the most popular guy in establishment circles. So I'm curious, what sort of backlash did you face from the media, your Senate colleagues, party bosses, etc.? What kind of backlash did you face from those people when you did read the Pentagon Papers into the record?
Well, first up, the backlash was almost immediate. It was Mike Mansfield that saved my career, because a group of Republicans, with Gerald Ford leading the pack, and Hugh Scott, were trying to get me censured. And Mansfield, who said that Gravel's done nothing, I met privately shortly after. Just a terrible weekend for me. I met with the leader, Mike Mansfield, and I walked in to see him. He said, "Mike, if I had your